Well, I'm so excited to, again, come on up here. Mark, introduce a friend of mine. This is Mark Alan Schoolmeesters. We've known each other for what now, like a lot of years, 12, 15,
probably about that,
years, yeah. He is currently the, what's your technical title? Worship?
I'm a central music pastor.
Central music pastor? Okay, at Eagle Brook Church in Minnesota, which, fun fact, our very own President Carey used to lead worship at this same church, so it's kind of fun. But besides that, Mark is just involved in a lot of creative work. He's a songwriter, an artist, a producer, worked with all sorts of fun bands. The thing I love about Mark is that won't be the first thing he says. He's not going to name drop. He's a super humble guy, and I remember just being challenged when he invited me to play on his worship team at Northern Pines, and so it is such a privilege to have him here. Would you welcome Mark Alan Schoolmeesters?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think so. Hey, everybody. Are you good? Can you hear me? Am I okay? It is great to be with you. Now, I have to just say for a minute, you're a campus pastor here. That's his title, right? Yeah. I've known him since he's, like he said, for a lot of years. And there are very few people in the world that care about other people as much as this guy does. And so you have an absolute privilege of having him be somebody who is on your side and championing you. And so I just want to say, Mike, thanks for the opportunity to be here. It is a privilege to be with you. Like he said, I do a lot of different things, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my story today, and then really talk about what I see as the potential in you today, if you're okay with that, all right? I'm a songwriter, a producer, and a music pastor, and I've worn a lot of different hats. And I got to tell you, I love the season of life that you are in. We call it young adult, right? I remember thinking, I'm technically an adult, but I kind of feel young. It's that season of I eat ramen and tuna, and I'm trying to figure out how to live with people that aren't my family. Anybody attest to that? It's what you're doing right now. And I am standing here today because somebody believed in me. And if you will let me, for the next few minutes, I want to be somebody who believes in you. You have unbelievable potential, and you have a gift inside of you. And our hope today is that we can talk about how we put that into motion. Is that all right with you? I'm going to take you back to a little bit of where my story started. So I grew up in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, where it is colder. Anybody been there or know anything about the Twin Cities? Yes, a few friends. Good to see you. I have always loved music. Music has been a part of my family, has been a part of my life forever. So when I was in 8th grade, I started playing in a band. I was the drummer, and these guys were juniors and seniors in high school. And my voice hadn't changed yet. I was about this tall. Well, I'm still about this tall. And we did music, and that became my life. That was my world. And then when I was 18, I started leading worship. That's not true. I was tricked into leading worship. So my senior year of high school, I start dating this girl, and I find out her dad's a pastor. And he says to me one day, hey, would you be willing to fill in this Sunday for our students and lead worship for them? And I said, I can do that. I play the guitar. I don't like to be in front of people, but I can do that. I can take one for the team. So I led, and it wasn't terrible. Next week, he says, hey, I heard it went pretty good. Could you fill in again? And I said, yeah, I can fill in again. So I filled in again. Same thing again. And finally, he said, hey, the guy you've been filling in for actually moved to Nashville. So would you like to permanently fill in? We could call it a 10-hour-a-week internship. And then he said, I think you have a gift inside of you, and I want to give you room to figure it out. Sometimes, you have to remember, friends, you have a gift in you, but sometimes it requires somebody else calling it out of you before you can even realize that it's there. Sometimes it takes somebody else seeing it before you go, oh, that's actually a gift, right? Because to us, we're just like, oh, this is just normal. This is how I do things. But the way other people see is they go, that's an unfair advantage. It's like the deck was stacked in your favor. 1 Peter 4 says this, God has given each of you a gift, so use them well to serve one another. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about how we discover our gifts. Okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I'm going to encourage you actually to take notes. This is homework. You are in school, and I know you're like, this is chapel, I shouldn't have homework. Here's why this is homework. Because you're not going to discover and develop and set your gifts in motion in a 20-minute message in chapel. It requires you doing some work on your own, okay? So the first step in discovering is to self-assess. I want you to think about this, that you would take some time and ask yourself these questions. What am I good at? What am I passionate about? Or what comes naturally to me? You could also say, like, what keeps you up late at night? Or wakes you up early in the morning? What do you have energy for when you're technically exhausted because you've done homework, sports, all the things, and you're like, I still want to focus on this thing? I want to say today, it's okay if you're like, I'm kind of nervous about this talk because I don't think I have any gifts or I don't even know what they are. The process of discovery is just that. It is a process. It's not an event. And you discover little bit by little bit. So after you take some time and go, okay, look inside, what do I see? Then I would love to encourage you to survey other people. Like, what do people say about you when you're not around? What are you known for? What are the things, and hopefully they're good things, right? Some of you are smiling, you're like, I hope people are thinking good things about me. But what are the good things about you? Is it something in your personality? Is it a skill or a trait? Ironically, the thing that you are great at is not usually the same thing as what you want to be great at. You with me? Like, I want to be an NBA superstar, but I'm 5'7", and I can't dunk unless the hoop is 8 feet maybe, probably more like 7. That's what I want to be great at. What I am great at, I can write songs, and I can encourage people. But that's not a recipe to be in the NBA, is it? And so sometimes we live in that tension of, I see a gift in somebody else, and I go, oh, that's what I want to do, because that looks exciting, rather than looking and going, what is inside of me? I want to encourage you that the job is not to convince everybody of what you want to do, but discover the gift that you actually have, not the one you wish you had. There's a difference between what I want to do and what I am made to do. Don't believe the guy who tells you a lie on Instagram, who says, if you don't have a real estate empire and fly private, by the time you're 24, you must be failing. That's not how you discover your gifts. There's actually a better way than Instagram guy. And the third part of discovery is that you would ask a trusted mentor, coach, parent, friend, what do you see in me? What gifts do I have? Asking somebody who knows us for their wisdom and perspective can unlock something in us. Proverbs 19 says, get all of the advice and instruction that you can so that you will be wise the rest of your life. When we hear someone who knows us, someone we trust, articulate what they see inside of us, it can be one of the most eye-opening things. Okay, so if you're like, okay, I'm with you, so you want me to think about it by myself, you want me to take a survey of what other people say, and then talk to a mentor, what do you actually see? I still do this to this day, and there's new things that I'm discovering about myself. Then the next conversation is to ask God. God, what have you put inside of me? As I sit and I look at all of these things, what do you say? The Bible says in James 1, chapter 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God who gives generously to all. Friends, we have gifts. You have gifts. We just might have to identify them. Okay, so after we can identify and discover, this is not like a 1, 2, 3-step process. You do this by this afternoon and voila, here's the magic recipe that you now have figured out your life. I'm 40 years old and I'm still figuring out my life. Okay? This is like a lifelong thing. But the second part is then to develop those gifts. And like I said before, development is a process, not an event. How many of you have ever decided to pick up a sport, learn a language, or learn a new instrument? Anybody? Okay? How many of you were successful and mastered on your first try? You? Come on up, let's talk. Me neither. Do you remember I told you I played in a band when I was in 8th grade? I thought we were awesome. Have you ever heard an 8th grader play drums in a band before? He thinks he's awesome, but the truth is, I thought I was awesome for years, and finally my mom confessed a few years ago. She said, "You weren't that awesome." My mom always wore earplugs to our concerts, and I thought it was because we were playing in somebody's basement or the sound system, or maybe it was, just normal, just loud. That's what you do. It maybe had a little bit more to do with a lead singer who really didn't sing in tune very well, and guitars that were definitely out of tune. I thought we were awesome, but we were developing into awesome. Some form of it. My point is this: development takes time, and it usually requires that we go through things that we would not willingly choose. I think in the development process, we learn as much what we're not made to do as what we are made to do. I believe the best things in life don't happen overnight. They develop over time. I told you when I was 18, I was tricked into leading worship, and I hated that. Not the being tricked part, I got over that, but the being in front of people part. I don't actually like being here right now. I'm like a total introvert. The last place I want to be is in front of people, with all of you looking at me. But I discovered in that process that this is one of my gifts. I began to realize that my insecurity and my fear wanted to shut my gift down. And I had to be intentional to give my gift a louder voice than my fear. So when I was 20, I started to pursue music. I started to record music. I started to write my own music. And I felt like, okay, I'm going to be an artist. That's what you did when you're 20, okay? You become the guy. You do the thing. Nowadays, you'd get a Spotify, and you'd get an Instagram, and you'd have the whole thing. Back then, we recorded CDs. And I sold these things. They're plastic. They're like this big. And I'd sell them out of the trunk of my car. You used to put them in your car, and you could listen. We used to have these things called a Walkman. Like a CD, you could... Headphones, wires, not Bluetooth. This is the era I grew up in, okay? So I started to record music, and I had some friends who said, "Dude, if you're going to record music, don't pay a studio. Let's build a studio." So we bought a bunch of equipment, and we built a recording studio. Then other people started asking me to produce their music. So in my early 20s, I start writing music, recording music, producing music for other people, and all the while, I'm trying to chase this dream. And I'm leading worship for high school and middle school students at my church, trying to figure out what the heck am I supposed to do with my life. I'm going to college, trying to juggle all these things. Along the way, I meet this girl. We date, we get married, and she's all in on the idea of let's own a conversion van and tour with a band. So that's what we did. We owned a conversion van. It was a high top, the DVD player in it. That's like a CD for videos. And then when I was 23, my perspective totally changed. I can remember the conversation like it was yesterday, and it was as if it was an audible conversation. You ever have a moment like that where you're like, oh, I can take myself back there? I felt like I heard God say, quit striving and be faithful to what is in front of you. It wasn't audible, but those words were pounding through my brain. And so for me, that translated to, we're going to quit touring, going to sell the van, stop traveling, and I'm just going to focus on building a team here investing in the people around me. And I literally thought I was letting my dream die. I didn't understand it, but I couldn't deny it either. And it wasn't that I was doing something wrong. It was just time for me to see that life was about more than me. Why do I tell you that story today? Because that season is where I really learned about developing my gift. Some of the best development comes through the hardest circumstances. I would also say that some of the best direction comes through the hardest circumstances. So I want to talk about 3 little ways that we can develop our gift today. You with me? Number 1, we grow our craft. Do everything that you can to become and remain a student in the field that you are pursuing. I mean, in the world of YouTube, podcasts, master classes, there's never been a time that learning is more readily available to you. Proverbs 21:5 says, "Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty." I learned in my story that I was developing even when I didn't think I was in the arena that I thought I was supposed to be in or that I wanted to be in. That season forced me to grow as a person, not as a performer. The second way that we develop is we cultivate our character. Your character is who you are and who you are becoming. And I think it's the most important thing that you can do in developing a gift. You're like, character has nothing to do with my sports ability or my musical ability or my creative ability. It has everything to do with it because it's who you are. Listen, when you catch your big break, and we're all like, stats say people in your generation think 25% say, I'm going to be successful and famous by the time I'm 25, I heard today. When you catch your big break, you are just going to be a big break version of what you already are. So if you're dysfunctional, guess what? It just gets magnified. You will just be a wealthier, more successful, more complicated person with a lot more to work through. And if I can plead with you to do one thing in this season of your life, as a college student, as a young adult, is to work on the person that you are becoming. It's your most important priority. It's more important than getting good at the thing that you're trying to get good at. What you do will change over time. But who you are, you, will always be you in every situation. You can't escape that. And you are establishing patterns right now, whether you realize it or not, that will be how you live life in 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. And I can guarantee it's not going to be easy. And you're going to have seasons that feel a little bit more like a setback. I know I've had my share of them. But to let your character grow in every situation is the thing. Now, the crazy thing is that my story didn't end at 23. When I was 23, I would have told you, my life is over. I'm washed up. Never going to get my big chance. But years later, God resurrected that. I had in my mind, God, it's supposed to look like this. I had how it was supposed to go. I had a picture of what my mind, of what success was. Now, here's what I want to ask you today. In our world today, you all have, if I said today, you're like, okay, yeah, I can maybe say my gift is this or my gift is that. It's somewhere and it's a thing with my brain. It's a thing with my skills, thing with my hands. It's a sport. It's a music. What do we define as success with our gift? Like, how would you say, I'm being successful? What are the things? Now, I'm asking you. I'm from Minnesota where people don't actually talk back. It's like a Midwestern thing. I'm asking you to actually talk back to me at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to ask you again, and I want you to just shout them out. What are some of the things that are markers of success in our world today? Money. Fame. Likes. That's pretty good. That covers a lot of them. What else? What did you say? I'm a hoot? Thanks, I guess. What is it? A career, okay? Anything else? Happiness. What did you say? Good grades. I love it. I think we have to redefine success. Let me illustrate it this way. A couple years ago, we bought and planted an apple tree. Has anybody ever planted an apple tree before? You have, okay. I learned a lot about apple trees. Number one, you can't plant them by themselves. You have to plant 2 trees because they need to cross-pollinate. That's a conversation for another time. Apple tree guy, I say to apple tree guy at the nursery place, I'm like, dude, how do I grow good apples? And he said, dude, that's the wrong question. The question is, how do you grow great roots? And I was like, what? Let me show you. I said, okay. He gets out a napkin and he draws this little picture for me. Art is not my skill. So this is my apple tree. He says to me, you want to have good apples, then you got to grow great roots. My logical next question is, apple guy, how do I know where the roots are if they're underground? It's a fair question, right? He drew a picture of the tree, and then he drew the roots. And he said, I want you to draw an imaginary line straight down from the furthest branch. He said, that is as far as the roots will extend. Here's the point. Your roots determine how wide your branches will grow. Your branches will never extend beyond the reach of your root system. So he said, if you want to grow your roots, he said every year you put fertilizer a few feet further out from here. And then the next year, the roots will grow to reach that fertilizer, and your branches will grow in turn. The third way that we develop our gift is we focus on our roots. Here's what I mean. All of this stuff, this is fruit. This is the top of the tree. The roots is who you are underneath the surface. And if you focus on this stuff is a natural byproduct. And that's what I didn't get at 23, that I finally got at 30 when this stuff started to happen. I'm not rich and I'm not famous and I don't have 1 million likes, okay? But it became successful in the world's eyes. But I had the character to handle it. So when I was 30, I got a phone call from a group in California called Jesus Culture, and someone said, hey, I heard some of your songs. These were songs that I had written in what I thought were my dormant season, like nobody knows me, I'm just in obscurity, and I think I'm just being faithful and just putting in my time until I get my big break, all the while realizing that time is actually the whole point. That the point is not about the big break, the point is about the people that you get to walk with along in life. And in that season, I got the phone call that said, hey, would you come and write with these people? And if I was 23 and they called me, the whole world would have known. You would have known. My mom would have known. My wife would have known. My kids would have known. My neighbors would have known. And it would have been all I could think about, all I could talk about. At the age of 30, it was kind of like, oh, that's cool. Hey, are you picking up the kids from kindergarten or am I today? It was just like I kind of got passed over because my perspective changed. At 30, I had cultivated enough character that I could handle that opportunity, that at 23, my life would have imploded. At 23, I wouldn't have told you it would have imploded, but looking back, I know that my life would have been a freaking train wreck if I would have had the opportunity at 23 that I wanted when I wanted it. The truth is that in your season that you feel like nobody sees you, God is preparing you. God is actually protecting you. In my case, he protected me from myself. Romans 8 says this, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God. That's usually where we stop at the verse, right? And who are called according to his purpose for them. Not according to our purpose. At 23, I wrote my verse to say, God's going to work everything out for me according to the way I think it's supposed to go. But God's purpose for you and God's purpose for me has less to do with what you do and more to do with who you are and who you become. In the music world, I say it this way, my job as a musician is to serve the song, not my agenda. So I have to give the song what it needs, not what I'm capable of giving to it. You ever been in a situation where you're like, oh, there's a musician, they can play circles around it, and they show that they can play circles around it, and you're like, that's all I can focus on. I can't think about anything else in the song except for that. That's giving the song what you could give it rather than giving it what it needs. The idea of giving it what it needs is like, oh, you just gave it just what it was necessary, not what you were capable of. The last thing I want to talk about today is how we deploy those gifts. The word deploy means to arrange in a position of readiness. It's about how we put our gifts in a position to be effective. And I've told you earlier that I've been around music for a long time. I've been a songwriter. That's what I do. I travel and I write songs with people, with artists, with bands. I produce music for artists, people, bands all over the world. And then I lead worship back home when I'm home. And I'm going to be real with you. The last few years, I have felt like that gift of songwriting has been growing into something else where I'm like, I'm writing more content than just verse 1, chorus, verse 2. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm doing blogs. Oh, maybe I'm just writing a book. I don't know. I'm just writing stuff. And I have had this pit in my stomach where I'm like, I know that I'm supposed to lean into something. Have you ever had that happen before? And for me, it's speaking. So last January, a new year came, and I had the same pit in my stomach that I've had for many years before. Every other year, I just ignored it because it was easier to do what I've always done and do what I'm good at and what I've figured out and be like, this is safe. I can do this without thinking. But doing this right here, this is stretching. So last January, I had the same pit in my stomach because I came to another January where I was like, oh, I got to do something with this. And I realized, oh, another year has passed and I've done nothing with this. So I did something simple. I said to God, God, I will say yes to any opportunity that you put in front of me to speak, big or small. I didn't think much of it, but I have to tell you that me standing here today is a direct result of that little bit of faith and then God's lot of bit of faithfulness. The best way I know how to encourage you to deploy the gift that God has given you is to give God your yes before you're asked. Now listen, you're not going to have it all figured out. There's no systematic plan to map this thing out. And you're going to have conversations in your head about why it's not going to work and why you shouldn't try and why you shouldn't even entertain it or even start leaning in a direction. I know because I've had them myself. The thoughts like, I feel stuck. I'm not ready. I'm scared. Somebody else is better. But those are fearful statements. What if my perspective and your perspective shifted to God will empower me. God is getting me ready. God will give me strength. And I am who God has equipped me to be. And I don't have to be somebody else. What would happen if this room of young adults all said, there's something that's unique that God has put inside of me? and I'm done trying to be somebody else, I want to go on the journey of discovering who I am. And I'm going to do that by self-assessing. I'm going to do that by surveying other people. I'm going to do that by asking a mentor. And I want to develop it. I want to put it to work. I want to grow it, grow the skill, grow my character, focus on my roots. And I want to set it in motion. I want to close today, maybe a little bit different than you normally do. Normally you close with a blessing. And writing songs is the way that I process life. It's the best way I know how. It's like therapy for me. I say if I don't keep writing, I'll basically flatline and I feel like I'm going to die at some point. It's my process with God of what's going on. It's my communication to the world. It's the way that I actually can walk away from something and go like, I get how to think about this and how to see it. And so what I want to do is sing a song that I wrote a few years ago. It's a simple song, and I'm not asking you to stand up and sing along. I'm going to sing a song that has been a part of my journey of saying, God, I want to be open. I'm going to hold back nothing. So I want your will and nothing else. I have to let my dreams die in order to put my trust in you, knowing that you maybe see a bigger picture. Because when I was 23, I thought I saw the whole picture. But I only saw a one-dimensional fragment of what has become the most amazing, beautiful picture.